There is talk about increasing the minimum capital for commercial banks out there. The outgoing boss of HFC Bank is saying that, well, it should be up to about 500 million Ghana cedis. He believes that this will help address the problems facing the financial or the banking sector right now, where some of the banks were forced to go down because they were having problems with their capital adequacy or having enough capital to undertake their business. Mr. Lehan believes that if these two banks that went down were well capitalized, they couldn't have gone through this challenge. Let's listen to him.
You have unscrupulous people who try to defraud the banks. And these people who are out there who did not pay are people who should pay. There are people out there who are living beyond their means and didn't pay the banks. So that's where the problem is. The blame is with the depositors who choose to want to get every ounce of interest rate out of the banks. Although they know the rate is not a reasonable rate, even in this low market, they still want 20%. So the blame goes there. The blame goes with the legal system. Because if you have a legal system and the loan starts to go bad, and it takes me 3-4 years before I could get a judgment in court, then you, the bad customer, realize that you could string me along for 4 years and I can't get back my money. So the blame is there. The blame is in the absence of a proper credit bureau, because at the end of the day, we don't have a mechanism whereby we could identify as an industry bad loans. So I am not saying it is always easy to point. The blame, by the way, is in the management of the banks, because I agree, in some cases, banks need to spend money on the training and development of their staff. Because at the end of the day, when you spend money on training and development staff, your staff gives better assessment of loans in the first place. The blame is also on the regulators as to how many banking licenses we keep giving and who we give banking license to.
I get you. Let's look at proposals, and the governor has said that, all other things being equal, maybe in the first week of September, there will be an announcement in capital increase. For you, do you think that a significant increase in capital could help address this problem?
I think a significant increase in capital, first to begin, we need to determine what is the level of capital that will allow for this industry to operate properly, and capital is a buffer against risk. This industry has certain built-in risk. If you were lending money in the United States and you had a proper credit bureau, if a loan went bad, or before I gave the loan, I could have gone to my credit bureau and know exactly that that person is a bad customer. This industry doesn't have that. Do you think that makes this industry more risky than the other? It does. All right? This is an industry whereby if the loan goes bad, it takes 4 years in the legal system before you get back your money. So there is a certain degree of risk that is prevalent in Ghana versus other societies. And therefore, capital is required as a buffer to ensure that when there are risks in the bank is able to withstand the risk. And the present level of capital we have seen is too low. The people, whoever has done the analysis, they are doing it because they have set a level of capital that they think is required and is adequate. And whatever that is, we must move to that level of capital. And when we do, George, it takes you to support. Stop this conversation about, this capital will allow for Ghanaian banks to close, and we have to have a special capital for Ghanaian banks, and we have to have a special capital for international banks, because at the end of the day, right, it is all about when your money and a depositor puts his money in the banking sector, right, he expects a certain degree of service. And at the end of the day, the regulator has a responsibility to protect depositors' funds. And there's a certain level of capital that is required to protect depositors' funds. Whether those institutions are local institutions or foreign institutions, the impact is the same.
How much will you propose there? How much would you think that would be well okay for? There's a range between 200 to 530 million Ghana cedis What would you think would be well good for this industry to ensure that we avoid these risks?
I would expect that the level should be no more or no less than $100 million. Whatever that falls to, as it turns out, is 430 million cedis. Sure.
And that was Robert Lehan being playing there. And this man will be stepping out of this country by this weekend to take up a ministerial position in his country, that is Trinidad and Tobago. We understand that he might be responsible for the utility sector. So the issues about the banking sector would just not go away. There's also an argument that if you look at the capital strength of most of the commercial banks, if you look at the fact that their non-performing loans are not doing well. So is the banking sector facing some crisis? Well, let's hear from the institutional and commercial manager at First National Bank. That is Victor Yao Asante.
Well, I don't think there's a problem as he puts it. Yes, there have been a couple of banks that have been in trouble, as you have seen in the past few days. It's been coming for a while. I think as the central bank said, they tried to work it out and it didn't. There are 30 plus banks, so it is possible that one or two, maybe three, maybe four will get into trouble. But on the whole, I think most banks are quite well capitalized. Most banks, if you look at their ratios, they are in the right direction. And I don't think it's particularly worrying that one or two banks. Indeed, I think it's actually a good thing to the extent that when people don't keep to what they have to do, because banking is very, very risky and everybody must focus. And therefore, I think when banks have not done the right thing, it's right to do what has been done.
Do you think that we are stretching the issues too much? I looked at the half-year results of some of the banks and their capital adequacy ratios. Some of them even are on the line below the 10% and all the rest. And I look at very high NPLs, and I ask myself that really is this industry that well capitalized as we have been made to understand?
No, it is. I mean, the regulator must definitely ask any bank that is under the required capital adequacy to make sure they put into place plans and correct them. Yes, there have been issues around specific industries. I think you all know that around energy, basically around some of the people who were in oil and gas, the NPLs in the banks went to as high as 20% over the last couple of years. But the good news is that in the last few months, what we've seen is that the energy bond, for example, which is about to be rolled out, some of the oil names, some of the oil exposures from the big oil producers like VRA and so on has been paid. And there's a specific plan around paying for some of the BDCs who, again, were significant with what was the issues around the NPLs, so has been resolved, and so on and so forth. So my expectation is that going forward, banks should become slightly more liquid, and then the banks that were found to be really, really in trouble have now been taken over. So I believe that solves the issue.
Mm-hmm. So you think that the payment of this energy sector debts could turn things around quickly?
Yeah, it's definitely going to help, because quite a number of banks were exposed around specifically. There are also other issues. It wasn't just the energy debt, but they were significant. Other banks had their own specific issues, some of who they've tried to resolve. But yes, resolving the energy exposures should significantly help.
So in all these developments about the banking sector, investors outside, they are very particular about what is happening in the banking sector. They buy the country's bonds, they trade a lot. So what are their views with respect to what is happening? A while ago, I caught up with Razia Khan. She's the chief economist of Standard Chartered Bank, and I first got her views on our debt situation as well as development in the banking sector.
Ghana has had some important debt management successes. In our view, one of the most important successes has been the extension of the maturity of domestic debt. For too long, Ghana was overly dependent on very short-term borrowing to finance its deficit, and that was creating a lot of pressure. It was borrowing at very high interest rates, and there was a need for very frequent rollover of that debt. The fact that the government has now proceeded with longer-term issuance means that it has cut the need for such frequent rollover, very short-term dependence on borrowing for the financing of the deficit. And that has already allowed interest rates to come down. It's already created meaningful improvements in terms of financing costs at the very short end. Of course, for the ultimate success of this, Ghana will have to be seen to be borrowing less over time. There are no substitutes for fiscal consolidation.
In your final commentary that you made in your presentation, when someone asked you a question that investors for these developments, you think that they are good and investors are quite convinced in terms of development that are currently happening in the banking sector?
There's quite a lot that is happening in Ghana. Investors will take the time to study what is happening. Generally, anything that improves the state of financial regulation, that creates confidence and trust in the banking system, will be positively received.
And for you, that is good as well, to encourage people. You look at the fact that non-performing loans are rising, the regulator has really taken action, and for you think that is good for the confidence in the banking sector?
Trust in financial regulation, trust in the ability of institutions to meet capital adequacy requirements are important for the ongoing health of the economy.
So Razia has brought us the views there of those who are in the international market. These investors, they trade a lot with us, so it looks like the situation might not be that bad. She also spoke about our debt situation. Now, another thing that has been going on over the past week when this whole takeover issue happened was about whether the rights of shareholders of UT Bank and also Capital were actually respected. The fact that nobody knew, if you were a shareholder of these two banks, you knew that this was actually going to happen. And there have been claims that these banks or the GCB actually refused to disclose this to shareholders. So were the rights of shareholders of UT Bank as well as Capital trampled upon in this whole actually takeover thing? Well, we sought the view of the former Director General of Securities and Exchange Commission, Dr. Edu Ananienchi.
In normal circumstances, you would expect shareholders to go through some of these things, resolution and others, to get to this point. But now, the new Bank and Specialized Deposit-Taking Institutions Act has empowered the Bank of Ghana to do so. And so they are working strictly under the law. The Bank of Ghana, if it sees any wrongdoing or any problems in the bank, has the power to appoint an administrator, official administrator. Or, if it's liquidation, to appoint an official liquidator. And all shareholders, directors, and everybody's rights would now be vested into the administrator or the liquidator. So that is the law.
But what about the Securities and Exchange Commission law as well, which actually requires that during such processes, it is not just the majority shareholder who would go ahead and approve this thing, but it should be made available to every shareholder?
No, that's not Securities and Exchange Commission law. It's not a securities industry law. It's basic company law. The Companies Act requires that certain decisions like mergers, acquisition, issue of new shares has to be approved by shareholders. So that's fundamental, one of the fundamental rights of available to shareholders. But the Act states clearly that where the provisions of the Act, that is the Banks and Specialized Deposit-Taking Institutions Act, where there is any provision in that Act which is inconsistent with provisions in the Companies Act, the Bank and Specialized Deposit-Taking Institutions Act prevail.
So if I get from you, no law has been breached with respect to this whole transaction?
The Act of the Bank of Ghana is firmly rooted in the law.
But then what happens to such as the company law, which also ensures that for those retail investor, that person is protected because it's put there to ensure that the majority, the institutional investor, doesn't always bamboozle his way through with these things?
Yes, but it's not the institutional investor which is doing that. This is a law that empowers the regulator, the sector regulator, to step in when the need arises and has all the powers that shareholders and directors would have ordinarily exercised. Now all the powers will be vested as soon as the Bank of Ghana appoints an official administrator or a liquidator. All these powers that and rights of the shareholders are vested in the administrator.
And it looks like this development will just not go out with respect to what has happened over the past 2 2 or 3 days with respect to the collapse of these banks. Let's look at other stories. An association of Ghana Industries has begun operations of a fund in order to develop a strong capital base for this thing to take off. Now, however, in an interview with Joy Business, the vice president of AGI, Fridake, warns the industrial bank alone cannot solve the issues that the industry is currently facing.
We should note that, granted that AGI finally rolls out its bank, it's not a panacea to solving all the issues regarding cost of credit and access to credit. I stated that in the cost of credit element, government has made some interventions. I listed some as the policy rate, the inflationary rate, the TB rate, and this needs a combinations with ID systems, that's an identification system, and identifying various properties and their owners and paying the right income tax on those ones, and then identify who is your customer. All these variables amidst a bigger picture will lead to the reduction of cost of funds and access to funds. And the borrowing of government, which goes back to the energy or the legacy debt, which government is trying to reprofile. So the mix is quite big. I believe they are all work in progress. AGI is still determined to unveil its bank finally. Currently, we have the fund that we are managing, and we look forward to growing it. We believe we'll do it organically, and as we get there, we would finally unveil our intent with running a commercial or an industrial bank.
Is that by the end of this year?
No, I won't give you timelines. It's a work in progress.
And that was Humphrey Dake talking about the AGI bank as well. Interesting development out there, because the industries also want to have their own bank to help protect their interest. On Marketplace, you know, we empower you with all the power that we have to give you to help grow your business. So why don't you let us take these investment tips?
Investment Tips is brought to you by Daffin Finance, Deposits, Investments, Borrowings and Advisory.
At Daffin Finance, we offer fixed deposits of various tenors, 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. Call accounts for your cash management. Money must not lie idle. Investment plan accounts to enable you build up cash for future use, for educational needs, for project needs, for your retirement needs, for your vacation or holiday needs.
Investment Tips was brought to you by Daffin Finance, Deposits, Investments, Borrowings and Advisory.
Interesting thoughts out there that could help you grow your business, or actually ensure that you get more for the value of money in your pocket. But what did you take this morning for breakfast? Chances are that you took a cup of tea, was likely a tea branded or produced outside the country. What about something that has been produced in the country? Now, that's what entrepreneur Georgina Kumsin has been doing for the past 3 years, and she's gradually growing it into more of a big business. The following business van brings you the story.
Georgina Kumsin takes us on a tour of one of her 3 farms at Abutia in the Northern district of the Volta region. She loves to farm.
I stayed with my auntie and we used to have a poultry farm in the house. So I developed that the passion from that place, because they gave me the free hand to manage the poultry farm, and we used to dress bears during Christmas time. That was when I was in, I think before I went to the secondary school. So after that, I wanted to go into farming, but I did not have the opportunity till I had the opportunity to do my national service in Dabuasi. And I was lucky to meet a good coordinator at that time who helped me to unveil my talent.
Georgina saved and started a small nursery where she was cultivating vegetables for her community. Vegetable cultivation was not bad business, but Georgina needed something to set her apart. As she acquired more acres to farm, Georgina started to export raw materials, especially to tea production companies outside Ghana. Then it occurred to her 4 years ago she could start producing tea in Ghana too. With help from researchers, she developed the formula for producing tea. Tea production started only last year. After the tea leaves are plucked, they are made to dry and then blended. It's quite simple if you have the equipment. Georgina produces lemon and lemongrass teas, but what's got everybody talking is the use of the Rosella plant, which is popularly called Sobolo here in Ghana, to produce tea.
I realized a lot of people were taking Rosella juice, and I had friends, they were complaining, maybe the sugar is too much, the concentration is too much, or maybe they want honey, they don't have honey. So I decided to make the mix because I was also doing it in the house, and people liked it. My friends and my family, people, they really loved it. So I said, then let me dehydrate it into a tea bag so that you can mix it as you want.
Georgina's weekly production target is 1,000 pouches of tea. She currently sells about 500 pouches of what has now become known as a Krome's tea brand.
What we want to do is to produce 10,000 pouches every month. Maybe by the end of this year, we want to give ourselves 6 months because the machine has to work full time. The machine is not working full time, so we'll produce 10,000 pouches every month. And then at the moment we are selling only in Accra, so we'll go to the other regions and then go to the sub-regions as well.
The tea lovers who have tasted Krome's tea so far really enjoy it, but Georgina is aware she faces competition from imported brands, some of which are inferior.
Initially I was using a different packaging, but Ghanaian market, they want fancy packaging, so I have to change the packaging to this one, and the packaging has to look like international level so that it can compete with any other product from Europe or from any part of the world. And people have to be able to take what we produce, because we are getting the raw materials from our own, from Ghana. We are producing everything in Ghana. We don't bring anything in. All the raw materials are produced here.
Aside from creating jobs for dozens of people, Georgina is excited. She's promoting healthy lifestyles.
The response has been very good, very encouraging. I have very good customers. The people who buy normally come back and buy, or even tell other people to buy, and they are having a lot of health benefits that I did not even expect. And I'm getting a lot of testimonies, good testimonies about the product.
And next time that you're thinking about grabbing that tea, remember Krome's tea is there. It's all about actually consume what we produce locally. And before we showed you that piece, I asked you what you took this morning. What are you going to take this afternoon? It can be a bowl of fufu or banku. Just like the dilemma ghost, I don't know what to take this afternoon. Should I do banku or should I do fufu? Well, I'll still be thinking about it. Good afternoon.